So our understanding is that the California Attorney General, in previous opinions, has opined that appointees to advisory bodies are not state officers because they do not exercise the state's sovereign power. So we recommend that to be consistent with these previous interpretations, state office should explicitly exclude anyone who's been appointed to an advisory body. Our other recommendation is that we think it's a little bit vague about whether appointees to city and county and special district bodies would be covered under this definition. We think that it's clear under Prop 11 that appointees to those local bodies are not meant to be included within the definition of state office, and we would recommend that the definition clearly say that local appointees are not included. We have a recommendation for the definition of appointed to federal or state office, which is to include appointments by the Board of Equalization. And the rationale there is that the commission is going to draw Board of Equalization lines. Persons who receive appointments from the Board of Equalization are arguably beholden to the appointing authority in the Board of Equalization, and there could be a conflict of interest if those folks serve on the commission. So we recommend that appointments by the Board of Equalization also be included, in addition to appointments by the governor and legislative members. We also recommend that the regulations be revised to make it clear that the auditor will publish a list of which appointed federal and state offices are covered by the definition in 60804. We think this will help the ability of potential applicants to determine whether their appointments fall within the scope of exclusions under Proposition 11. I also wanted to mention that the organizations participating in this working group have had a very robust discussion about whether the scope of appointed to federal state office should be narrowed. The group was not able to reach consensus on this about whether it should be narrowed, and if so, how it should be narrowed. The discussion has focused in part on whether appointments to compensated positions should be excluded from service on the commission, but not other appointed positions. So I wanted to mention that this is one area where the group does not have consensus, but because it's one of the more significant issues, we think we wanted to highlight it and let you know that various members of the group will be presenting their own individual viewpoints. So I'd like to do that now. So no longer presenting points in the working group letter, but instead speaking on behalf of my organization, as well as the Mexican American Legal Defense and Educational Fund and the NALEO Educational Fund. So we've provided you with a separate letter outlining 6 points, and I'd like to talk about 3 of those points. So the first point I wanted to talk about is the recommendation we make in point number 2 in this 3-group letter. So our perspective is that the definition of appointed to federal or state office potentially excludes a very large number of individuals who we think are unlikely to be beholden or perceived to be beholden to their appointing authority. And we think that Section 60804 should be revised to avoid overbreadth. So we think that in terms of judging whether someone can be reasonably considered to be beholden or perceived to be beholden can be judged by looking at whether the appointee is salaried, receives salaried compensation. We think this is a fair measure. It also provides a measure that is clear and easy to administer. In contrast, our perspective is that appointees who receive only a per diem are not reasonably beholden or can be perceived to be beholden to their appointing authority. Someone who receives a per diem simply does not get enough of a financial benefit to justify the time and effort of serving in their appointed position. they could spend the same time and effort engaging in other opportunities which provide a regular salary or are otherwise more financially lucrative. By its nature, per diem compensation is not regular, it's not as dependable as getting a salary. So we think getting a per diem does not provide enough of a financial benefit to make the appointee beholden to their appointing authority. We think the same rationale applies to appointees who receive only reimbursement for travel expenses. So our recommendation is to limit the definition of appointed to federal or state office to include only appointees to salaried positions. You may hear some arguments that if the BSA were to narrow the definition in this manner, that would constitute impermissible legislating. We would disagree. We think, as I mentioned at the outset, we think that it's important to narrow this definition to avoid overbreadth. We think the BSA has the responsibility and the duty to interpret Prop 11 in a manner that avoids conflict with other legal considerations. And we don't think doing so constitutes impermissible legislating. We'd also just mention that individuals from California's historically underrepresented diverse communities seek seats on commissions and boards, and if we were to unduly exclude those appointees from serving on the commission, that would conflict with Prop 11's intent that the selection process produce a commission that reflects the state's diversity. So our suggested revision is in the appendix to this letter. The second point I wanted to address out of this three-group letter is in point 5. Generally speaking, we think that the proposed regulations should be revised to place a greater emphasis on the Federal Voting Rights Act and the role of the Voting Rights Act in ensuring that diverse communities have equal electoral opportunities. We think that a close reading of Prop 11 indicates that the drafters wanted the Commission to really pay attention to the role of the Voting Rights Act when they're drawing the district lines. Prop 11 makes Voting Rights Act compliance supreme over the other mandated criteria, and Voting Rights Act compliance comes second only to population equality. In addition, the Commission, when it's hiring its legal counsel, must hire legal counsel who have demonstrated experience and expertise in enforcing and implementing the Voting Rights Act. So if one reads those two provisions, to us it's clear that the Commission was intended to pay very close attention to the Voting Rights Act. So we have several recommendations for the regulations to reflect this intent. And we would also want to frame the intent in a proper way. So we think that we think that Prop 11 is intended to have a selection process that results in a diverse commission, also a commission that understands the needs and interests of diverse communities, but going one step further, that the commissioners understand how redistricting affects whether elected representatives respond to the needs of diverse communities. We think that the regs do a fairly decent job of getting at the first 2 points, promoting a selection process that results in a diverse commission, and also a selection process that results in a commission that understands the diverse needs of communities. But where we think some improvement could be made is having a commission that understands how redistricting impacts whether elected representatives serve those diverse needs. So we have 2 recommendations. In section 60805, which talks about the definition of appreciation for California's diverse demographics and geography, we think that this could be expanded to include whether applicants have an understanding of the fact that California's diverse communities have historically faced an uphill battle in gaining fair representation, an understanding of how the placement of district boundaries affects whether these diverse communities have equal electoral opportunities, and also a general awareness of the role of the Voting Rights Act in ensuring equal